Hi there, I'm James Osborne, the co-founder of the Recruitment Network, and this is the TRN Podcast. Every week, we unpack the strategies, the technologies, the processes and mindsets fueling today's top-performing recruitment agencies. We take a look behind the scenes of some great recruitment businesses. We listen to the real-life stories of those who have built those businesses, and we learn from some of the industry's greatest thought leaders to help you become both future fit and future relevant. So let's begin with this next episode of the TRM Podcast.
Firstly, Mark, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. I know you're just literally back from a trip abroad, so good to see you. How are things?
Firstly, thanks for inviting me onto this. I think the most important thing for you guys listening is to know that I've literally been in a semi-startup all the way, which we built up all the way to 450 people in 4 countries. So that was an entirely organically funded model. That was Hill & Glynn business. So it literally started with 15 of us in a room in Southampton thinking, what do we want to do with this? And we made lots of mistakes, and we did lots of things well, and we did lots of things right, and we built a very successful business.
When we say that the industry's changed, there'll be people listening into this who've probably only been in the industry maybe for 5 years, 10 years, etc. When we talk about it's changed and it's changing, what does that mean in context in your world? You see, how has recruitment evolved, and how is our industry changing, and therefore we'll work out later on about how we're going to adapt to it.
Yeah, well, I think it's quite interesting. It's a bit like fashion. Everything comes full circle if you wait long enough. So when I was back on a desk, lost in the midst of time to the vast majority of this audience, that there was much less competition. The market was less well defined. There was very little, if any, technology. Talent acquisition teams really didn't exist. Routes to market were very different. And the role of a recruiter was very much sales-led, customer-facing, candidate-facing, all that kind of stuff. And the sort of admin you had to do was all very paper-based, really, with some technology. The industry's changed a lot. And if you look at a desk 2 years ago, 3 years ago to 25 years ago, there's a lot of process, there's a lot of technology, there's a lot of compliance, and a lot of these desks have become 30-40% administrative in the broader sense. We're now in a world where, particularly through automation, I know we'll talk about technology for sure because it's critical. But I think we've got to be careful when we talk about technology, particularly AI, because it's a very broad church. A lot of what's happening in recruitment and other industries as well is the implementation of AI has been largely focused around automating tasks, whatever those tasks might be. So where we are now, and I think I'm seeing this in a lot of the businesses I'm not only working with, but talking to people I know in the industry, all that kind of stuff, is, well, actually what's happening now is these desks that maybe were 30, 35, 40%, administrative tasks now, most of that can be done in some form of automation. And so we're now looking for, what does the recruiter of today look like? Because we're almost coming back to this full circle thing of what we now need at the desk level is consultants who have the ability to build relationships by whatever method, who have, the ability to sell, let's use that dirty word, sell, and who can use technology, particularly AI, and AI will continue to develop better than anyone else, because AI is not, in whatever form, it's not going to displace recruitment. What it's going to do is it will displace people who aren't very good at using it. Yeah. So it will replace tasks, it will replace elements of the job. So therefore, we need to redefine the role of the recruiter in today and tomorrow, which is going to be different skill set to what's been the case over the last few years. My final comment, I know a lot of people are struggling with this or finding this difficult because a lot of the people they maybe have in the desks, we know recruitment at the desk level is still quite a young industry. And there is this generational difference. A lot of these guys and girls aren't necessarily used to a world where relationship building is built in a real world kind of way. But I think that's an increasing initiative for the industry.
And this is where that piece around being coming full circle is absolutely right. Because if you go back to the good old days, I hate to use that expression because it makes it sound old, and it is old. But the reality is, the good old days was you had to get off your backside and go and see people, and do deals face to face. That feels like it's really coming back again, which I think is brilliant. But then, as you quite rightly said, we've got generations coming through who are more comfortable sending messages, sending Snapchats, etc., etc., etc. So there's a real interesting play here, because we did a whole session around the evolution of the buying process and how customers like to buy and candidates like to buy in a different way. The way they want to interact with us potentially is slightly different as well. So you've got this whole evolution now about do we understand how people want to interact with us? Do we have the right skills with the people in the business, in our businesses, to be able to go and do that in return? Are we going to attract more people into our industry now, good recruiters into our industry who have those sales skills, or are we going to lose people because they didn't sign up for that? They rather do. It's really fascinating times from that point of view, I think.
Oh, it is, absolutely. And it is in flux. It is in flux. But one of the things I would say, and one of the points I wanted to make today, and I know it seems like a really obvious one, but I think the industry as a whole has a problem with productivity per head because it's too low. It's generically too low. Now, I know there'll be lots of people leaping off their sunbeds or whatever saying, oh, I've got, great billers and all that. And I'm sure you have, and I don't deny it for a minute. But the reality of life, regardless of the model or anything else for that matter, what you've fundamentally got is a normal curve of distribution, right? You've got, on the left-hand side, you've got new starters, people building up, maybe people who are struggling to become recruiters, maybe it's not the industry for them, and maybe failing, all that kind of stuff. The other end, on the right-hand side, you've got your handful, your 10, 15% who are knocking it out the park month in, month out. The bulk of your recruiters sit in the middle, right? And they revolve around an average. Some may go to the left, some may go to the right, but the reality is the bulk of the 65, 70% of your people are going to sit somewhere around the middle. And it still doesn't, it never ceases to amaze me at the moment that we're still talking about, perm, for example, perm recruitment levels. I know it's a very challenged market at the moment, but perm recruitment levels being not that dissimilar, what good looks like or what budget level is, acceptable level of billing is, to what it was 20 years ago.
Yep.
So when you look at the costs that the businesses have now compared to 20 years ago, that level of, production, fee earning, margin production, is not going to convert to much profitability. If you don't have enough profitability, you're not going to have enough money to reinvest, to deploy technologies or rehire in the right kind of mold, or invest in L&D to promote the type of people you need for tomorrow's world rather than today's. So there's this squeeze on it, and I think you can see that happening at the moment. Lots of recruitment businesses that most ever since the COVID thing or the credit crunch went bust this year. A lot of them are small, very small, and all the rest of it, maybe lifestyle, whatever. But cash is so important now. Most of the businesses they're very focused on cash and cost and all the rest of it, understandably so. But so if we come back to the point, okay, we've got to look at and you can't manage by averages. Kind of cut off the bottom, cut off the top, look at the bit in the middle and say, okay, that's 70% of my fee earning headcount are at moment averaging this. Right, I need them to average this plus 20% or 15% or whatever the right number is, because I need to get to that level of sustainable billing, producing this amount of profitability, so I can invest in the business, and therefore, because particularly when you're an SME, the ability to invest and build your business are so linked. Particularly as we are moving into an era where technology and all that is becoming more important in reshaping the desk, and no one's doing it for free, are they? So the technology costs, and you've still got all your other costs, your salaries, your offices, your whatever, software licensing and all those kind of things. And if you look at the results of the big scaled recruiters, Hayes, Randstad, Robert Half, their results are pretty poor, and they're struggling with this because their fee earning per head is too low. They've got too much overhead, blah blah blah. So if you bring it into the SME world, it becomes much more of a definable problem, because you can dissect quite quickly and look at, well, actually, on average, we're making 100 grand a head on margin level. That ain't enough. So how do we improve it? And if I could just touch on one broad wraparound, I'm sure we'll and I don't want to. In amongst all the changes in the market, which you're absolutely right about, James, and everyone's seeing and feeling it, we've also got to remember that some of the core basic business propositions still have to be right. So, and by what I mean, just a couple of really obvious examples, but something businesses often get slightly wrong is, what is the strategy for the business? Right. And what actually happens a lot of the time is it's not a strategy, it's an ambition statement. We want to be market leader in this market by 2030. Now, that's fine as an ambition statement, but the issue is is, can you underlay your strategy with an implementation plan, an execution plan, a playbook, call it what you will? Because actually, when you boil it down, a strategy is one thing only. It's a defined plan to reach one or more specified goals in a timeline. That's all it is. So whilst there are many consultants who will happily take your money all day long to run strategy development sessions, unless you particularly want to do that, you don't need to. What you need to think is, okay, what is this business trying to do, and who do we want to be? And then it's got to be phrased in a way that you can then take that and break it down into milestones, an execution plan. And this is the bit I find over and over again is a disconnect. So a business wants to be market leader, but they've got no real clarity on what's the implementation plan to do that and the milestones to get there and how do you know it. So if you have something like, I want to be market leader, well, how do you know when you are? All those kind of things. So some of the core basics of good business planning, particularly around strategy and implementation and execution, are really important. We keep those front of mind. And for all you guys and girls out there who own businesses, it's a good thing to revisit that core now, because your view of strategy and what you need to do to get there is probably going to be different, which does map into totally the change in the market, the revolution and evolution of the market. But you still have to get those things right, because it's a wraparound of everything you do.
If you were taking a business today and going, right, let's start this journey now, what are some of the quick decisions we would want to make early to get going on this journey of smartening ourselves up a little bit to be really fit for purpose in this type of market?
I think it comes back to some of the core concepts again. And what I would recommend, and I have this conversation a lot, is throw out your history for a minute. Forget that for a minute, right? Let's just, because some of that may be relevant, some of that may not be relevant. Forget where you come from, because what got you here won't get you there, and all those kind of good old sayings. So I'm sure we're all very familiar with all of those sorts of things. But the reality is, what I find that businesses find difficult is to actually do that, to actually say we need to completely rethink what we do. Yes, the product's still the same, i.e., we find someone for a job, we put them into a job, and the client's happy, and we acquire clients, and we build candidate pools, all that kind of stuff. So the core kind of thing, the core kind of activities are still broadly the same. But what's different is how we do it, and what is the proposition to market. Because if I can as well, one of the things we need to be very clear about, particularly when we're talking about AI and in its various guises, and I think we're still very much at the beginning of what that might mean. Whether you're an SME or a volume recruiter or whatever you may be, the one thing to remember, these TA teams, internal recruitment teams, have access to all the same tools that we do. So what is your proposition to a client? What is your proposition to a candidate that makes you different to what they would experience anyway? And I think that's quite an important question, and that's not just a tech question, although the tech is an element of it, and we're all becoming much more tech-enabled businesses. So come back and answer the question, what is a smart recruitment business? What is a smart agency model? It's got to be relevant to your market. You've got to have a strategy that makes sense in today's and tomorrow's world. You've got to be able to tie a execution plan, an implementation plan, a playbook to that, so if you're getting there. All of those things have to be right. You've got to consider, how do you deploy technology, in what format, and for what? Because there's a world of difference between automating tasks, automating email outreach, automating content, all those kind of stuff we know we're doing to greater life, and truly agentic type AI that will actually reach out, will interact with certain candidates, maybe clients, whatever. And I'm not talking about bots on a website necessarily. I'm talking about actual outreach. So that's a very different thing, and we don't know where that is. I think I think one of the smart things that a smart agency needs to do is revisit this every year, because I think it's moving so fast, and the landscape is changing so quickly. I think it's concertinaed the review process into much shorter timelines than would have been the case, because the evolution of the market and the dynamics around it are faster than I've ever seen them. Things are changing almost by the month. Therefore, a smart approach to that is to consistently and constantly review where you are, review what you're doing, review how you're doing it, and is it still right? 9 times out of 10 it is. Then there may be another seismic change in what someone else is doing or what you choose to do that changes the game plan yet again. And I think that's where we are that this rate of change, and this I think is one of the things that is really difficult for businesses to respond to, and even more than business, it's a really hard thing for people to respond to. The speed of this, the rate of change is so much faster. So I think as a business owner, or as a chief exec or an MD or in a senior leadership team, whatever it is, you need to be reviewing everything you're doing to ensure it is relevant and remaining relevant.
So let's presume everyone listening onto this call, so I want to finish off on some practical notes here, by the way, Mark. So let's presume everybody on the call here today has got a strategic ambition statement. They know where they want to get to, they're excited by it, they've got a strategy, a plan to get there. Let's say it's a recruitment business of anywhere between 6 to 12 headcount. Let's just go with that size business for the sake of it. And you are going to help them build a 90-day sprint plan. What would be in your 90-day sprint plan? What are the steps, the tactical, practical steps that a recruitment business leader on this call today should go, right, tomorrow morning, I'm going to get myself ready to do the biggest 90-day sprint plan I've ever done in my business. What does that look like?
Right. For me, the way I'd approach it is go, okay, if it's a 90-day sprint, where do you want to be at the end of 90 days? Right. So this is the outcome. You've got to define the goal, because otherwise you've got nothing to step change against it or know if you've got there or not. So you've got to have a defined outcome, whatever that may be. But it needs to be a quantitative rather than a qualitative outcome. This is where I want to get to. So you go back, okay, you've got 90 days to achieve this. Identify the barriers, and I've been seeing a few words tick up, so identify what is going to stop you, what are the hurdles going to be, and how do we deal with them. So if it's time, often it's time, well then you have to make a conscious choice about what you don't do to create the time to do the things you do want to do. Finance is often one of them. If there's a financial implication, you'll depend on, it's also a broad thing, depending on how your business is financed, talk to whoever it is, whether it's in a fund or bank or whatever you've got, and explain what you're trying to do. Too often, I think business owners do stuff and not actually tell people maybe supporting them in financial terms what they're planning to do, why, and what they want the outcome to be. Then you've got to look at your people bit, you've got to look at your process bit, so you've identified all the things you think might get in the way, break them into where they sit in your organization. Is it new? Is it a change? Do we need to stop doing this? Do we need to do more of that? What do we need to do? So you've got to do that exercise pretty quickly. So depending on what your 90-day objective is, will determine which of those blockers are most relevant, because some of them actually won't be blockers. They may be just things you kind of have to live with. So there is always an element of compromise. So to get to an end game, you've got to have, what's the overarching thing we need to get right? So let's take a simple example. You've got there, so 10, 12 billers, we've got a productivity problem. We need to get productivity up. We're bringing AI tools, all the rest of it. So we need to secure more business with existing clients. For example, let's take a really simple example. Rather than go and look for new clients, which is a much slower burn, as we know, are we doing everything we could be with our existing client portfolio? Okay, so that might be, how do we therefore get to that point? Right, okay, well, actually, our best two people to go out and spend 30 days just selling, finding out, networking through, land and expand model through the customer. If we do that, what does that mean for work that comes in? How do we deal with it? How do we reward that person? Deal with the practicalities of it. But if what you need is more work from existing client portfolio, then you need to have a plan to do that, and you need to have measures in place that would enable you to do it. Because if you can't do that, if it creates more problems than it solves, you'll never do it, because you'll just run into the mud. And that's the thing. And bring your people with you, explain what you're trying to do, what the outcome is, and let's be blunt, what's in it for them, right?
Yep.
So if this puts the business in a better place, creates more opportunity, then that's why we should do it. But you've got to identify in all of this, and you've got to identify, if you're achieving a 90-day plan, what is the key driver or drivers, no more than two, that's going to enable us to get there. Everything else, you either compromise on, live with it for another 3 months. If you've been living with it for 2 years, you can live with it for another 90 days, right? So don't try and fix everything. Fix a thing that needs to be different to enable you to get your 90-day outcome. Identify all the blockers. How can you get over them? Can you live with them? Do we just sweep them aside? And in all of this, you've got to look at the practicalities of it, whatever the requirement is. So you've got to build a organization specific plan with a clear outcome and a clear steps to it. And the key bit about an execution plan, an implementation plan, the key thing about it is what are the things that are going to get in the way and what are the enablers? It's both sides of the same coin. I don't know if anyone's done a thing called causal chain analysis. So it's a really simple exercise, quite visual. It's quite a good thing to do. Very briefly, you use different colour post-it notes, right? It's a very visual thing. You do it yourself, you do it with your key team, whatever. And you say, right, here we are. This is where we are today. 90 days, we want to be here. Let's put all the yellow stickers indicate all the enablers that would enable us to get there, and all the red stickers, what are all the things that are going to stop us? What are the blockers? Yeah, and let's look at how we deal with each of those things.
And that's a wrap for this episode of the TRN Podcast. Thank you for listening. And make sure you grab the free episode toolkit. All the links are in the description. And click follow in your podcast app so you can get notified of our next episode. If you want to get more out of your business and your people, then please unlock 30 days from our platform, TRN World, for free. And help yourself to all our training content, our guides, our templates, and peer insights. You can get started at trnworld.com/trial. And finally, if you found this episode of the TRN Podcast of use, please share it with your network and tag TRN on any socials with your takeaways. Otherwise, message us directly if we can help in any way. We do reply to every question. Otherwise, we'll see you next week on the next TRN Podcast.